The show begins with excitement in the studio as the host introduces the night's special guest, legendary musician Paul Simon, to a cheering audience. Music plays in the background while the crowd applauds warmly, setting a lively and welcoming tone. Paul greets the host, and both express happiness at seeing each other again after some time. The host mentions that Paul is about to head out on tour once again. Paul explains his upcoming schedule, saying he will leave on Monday and begin his tour in Prague. From there, he and his band will travel across Europe for a couple of months before returning to the United States for summer performances. The conversation shifts into a nostalgic direction as the host recalls Paul's early days in Europe. He reminds Paul that in his younger years, he had performed in Europe after starting out in America with his musical partner during their early teenage years. The host references their early collaborations and performances, sparking memories from Paul's past. Paul reflects on those early experiences, explaining that he moved to London in 1964, shortly after a major historical moment in the United States. He lived there for about 2 years. During that time, he was exposed to a completely different musical environment, which had a deep impact on his artistic development. The host jokes while pointing out his old photograph from that era, teasing Paul about the atmosphere and people around him. The conversation remains light and humorous as the audience laughs and applauds. Then the host asks an important question: how did living in Europe affect Paul's music? Paul explains that the experience had a huge influence on him. He became deeply inspired by the local musical traditions, especially Celtic and English folk influences. While he had already heard some of these sounds in America through artists like the Everly Brothers, being in Europe allowed him to experience the original roots of the music. He shares that this exposure changed his understanding of guitar playing. He initially started with electric guitar but later transitioned to acoustic guitar. During this period, he learned fingerpicking techniques and developed a more refined musical style. Paul recalls performing in small folk clubs, which were often just small rooms above pubs. These venues were intimate, sometimes holding only 50 to 75 people. Sometimes there was a microphone, and sometimes there wasn't. These early performances taught him how to structure a set, connect with audiences, and develop stage presence. The host then asks whether Paul ever performed on the streets. Paul admits that he did busk in Europe occasionally, especially in Paris. He humorously describes his early attempts as a terrible mime, which makes the audience laugh. He explains how street performing worked. Musicians would find locations with good acoustics, such as building entrances with natural echo. They would start playing, attracting small groups of people. As more people gathered, the crowd would grow larger, eventually forming a circle around the performer. Paul describes how performers use clever strategies to increase engagement, including having a partner collect money from the crowd at the right moment. The audience laughs and applauds as he jokingly refers to it as a kind of show business trick. The host praises the story and jokingly tells viewers to write it down, emphasizing how much performance strategy Paul learned during those early years. The conversation moves to one of the biggest milestones in Paul Simon's career, when his song, The Sound of Silence, became a hit in the United States while he was still in Europe. The host asks how Paul found out about the song's success at a time when there was no internet or instant communication. Paul explains that music charts were published in magazines like Cashbox and Billboard. These magazines listed top songs in ranked order. He recalls checking the chart positions nervously. At first, the song was listed at lower positions in the bubbling under section, meaning it was close to becoming a hit, but not quite there yet. Each week, the ranking slowly improved, moving closer to the top 100. Paul describes a moment when he was traveling to Denmark for a performance. While waiting for the new issue of Cashbox, he went to the publisher's office to check the chart results himself. He remembers the suspense of slowly reading through the rankings, hoping to see the song climb higher. As he scanned through the list, he noticed the numbers improving step by step until he finally reached position 59. At that moment, he realized something significant had happened. He felt that his life and career had permanently changed. The audience applauds as Paul reflects on how that moment marked a turning point in his musical journey. It was the moment when he understood that he had achieved a real breakthrough. The host then asks what makes a song interesting to him as a songwriter. Paul explains that different elements contribute to this, including harmony, rhythm, and lyrics. elements come together to create something emotionally powerful, what he describes as a kind of musical explosion or implosion. He adds that sometimes he is interested in revisiting older songs to explore their harmonic structure or change their arrangement. However, he notes that lyrics are much harder to change. Once written, they feel fixed and meaningful in a way that cannot easily be rewritten. Paul reflects that he sometimes looks back at older songs and feels he could have improved them by changing the final verse, but he usually avoids altering lyrics because they carry emotional truth. He also explains that songs can be transformed through context. A folk melody from England could be reinterpreted as reggae or even performed in different cultural styles like South African music. Despite these changes, the core identity of the song remains intact. The discussion continues with humor as the host references Paul taking song requests during live performances. A clip is shown where audience members try to convince him to play certain songs. Paul shares a funny story about a concert where someone repeatedly requested Kodachrome. At first, he refused, but the audience kept insisting. Eventually, he jokingly asked for $20 to play it. When someone actually paid, he performed the song briefly, which surprised the crowd. The audience laughs and applauds as Paul admits that sometimes money does influence live performance decisions in a playful way. The host then brings up Paul's songwriting process, specifically how he sometimes writes lyrics after creating music. He asks whether Paul ever resists certain lyrics if they don't feel right. Paul explains that yes, sometimes he does. In earlier years, many of his songs began with anger or frustration. However, he often tried to transform that energy into something more meaningful or poetic rather than starting from an angry place. He reflects on one of his famous songs, joking about how it originated from a more emotional or playful tone, and how lyrics can evolve over time. He explains that when writing, he prefers to let the music guide him rather than forcing a meaning too early. The conversation becomes playful as the host jokingly analyzes one of Paul's songs as a metaphor. Paul humorously acknowledges this interpretation, noting that songs often contain metaphors whether intentional or not. The host praises several lyricists and asks Paul who he admires. Paul responds by naming influential artists such as Chuck Berry, Bob Dylan, Joni Mitchell, and Stevie Wonder. He explains that these artists shaped his generation and influenced storytelling and music through powerful and memorable lyrics. Finally, the conversation shifts to audience interaction during concerts. The host mentions how fans often sing along during Paul's performances, especially during songs like The Boxer. Paul says he enjoys this experience because it creates a shared emotional connection between performer and audience. However, he mentions that in some places like Dublin or Belfast, audiences sometimes sing in their own rhythm, which can turn the performance into a playful challenge. The discussion ends on a philosophical note when the host asks Paul what music is for. Paul admits he is not entirely sure. He describes music as something deeply natural to human beings, almost like it has always existed. It has the power to create strong emotions such as joy, sadness, and even inspiration for movement and action. He expresses amazement at how music can influence human behavior so strongly, calling it something close to magic. The host agrees humorously, and the conversation closes with laughter and applause as the audience prepares for Paul's live performance.